you find a nice example of either one of these, snatch it. Man, these are really nice receivers.
Yes, aren't you a good girl? Yes, sweetie.
Hello, welcome to Lancaster Hi-Fi. I'm going to do another receiver comparison today, and in particular, I'm going to compare the Pioneer SX-828, fully exhaustively restored. It's been in several of my videos. And the Marantz 2252. This should be a pretty fair comparison, although the SX-828 is a little bit older than the Marantz. But comparable power. 52 watts for the Marantz, 54 watts over the 20 hertz to 20k hertz on the Pioneer. I've selected some music to do the testing. My favorite things, John Coltrane. We'll do Flashlight off of Funkadelic by Parliament. We'll do the last movement of Tchaikovsky's Fourth. We'll do Master of Puppets by Metallica. In Between Days by The Cure. Chuck E's in Love off of Ricky Lee Jones' first album. Make It With You from Bread, or the best of Bread. Let's go over the equipment. The CD player will be this Magnavox CDB 582. It was one of my first resto mods, so it's been restored and lightly modified. Of course, the Marantz 2252, all nicely lit up right now. The Pioneer SX-828, not lit up right now. And a recent acquisition of mine, this Gemini DJ's turntable, the TT04. It does have quartz lock and also pitch adjustment. It's basically a copy of the Technics SL1200. Shure M91ED cartridge, upper middle of the line stylus from LP Gear. Elliptical stylus. Bonded diamond, not a nude diamond. My Genesis 2 speakers from Genesis Physics. These are kind of my favorite speakers, and they go particularly low in the bass. They have a passive subwoofer, and I've got them tilted up on these short stands. So I have put some a dog bed in front of one speaker, some sheepskin in front of the other to dampen bass reflections off the hardwood floor. Got the tripod set up roughly in the listening position on the couch there. Of course, the back wall there is covered with reflective surfaces, but the wall is pretty well broken up by all those frames, so not a terrible echo in here. Although it's kind of echoey in here. There's nothing on the ceiling, but you know, there's a lot of clutter in here, including a grand piano. The tripod's set up a little bit in front of where my head will be listening, but it's at about the right elevation, and the speakers are pointed at it. I will have to do my listening all at once on one receiver and then switch to the other. I will try to do some level matching as I get going with each one. Oh, there's Bella. Hi, Bella. Good girl. Bella's a Labradoodle. You can't tell. She's a very sweet dog.
Yes, aren't you a good girl? Yes, sweetie.
She's not sure what to make of all this, especially the tripod is kind of intimidating to her. Anyway, so I'll try to do some level matching, like on the first song for each one, in order for this to be a reasonably fair comparison, so I'm not overtaxing one with respect to the other and so on. Probably do relatively loud listening level, but you know, somewhat comfortable. I don't want to overtax either of these amplifiers, either of these receivers. I want my test to take the best advantage of the engineering of these two receivers.
Baby climbing on rainbows, but baby here goes.
is it here? I look in the drugstore. Is it here? No, don't come here no more. Chucky's in love. Chucky's in love. I don't believe what you say to me. This is something I've got to see. Is it here? I look in the pool hall. Well, is it here? I look in the drugstore. Is it here? No, don't come here no more.
Go on away from me. And I know I was wrong when I said it was true. That it couldn't be me, but be far in between without you. Without you. Go on away from me. And I know I was wrong when I said it was true. That it couldn't be me, but be far in between without you. Without you. Everybody's got a little light under the sun, 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 under the sun. Everybody's got a little light under the sun, 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 under the sun.
Although I said I would try to do level matching between the two receivers, I haven't tried to do any level matching among the different tracks. And in particular, among the LP tracks, Metallica has the lowest level, probably because there's the least compression. Of course, the CD tracks are way louder than the LP tracks, and that's simply reflective of the level of the line out from the CD player versus the phono stage line out or whatever in the receiver itself. So what do I think? Unless I can listen to one song on one receiver and then the other receiver, same song, back to back, it's really hard to tell the difference unless the difference isn't subtle at all. And I think the differences between these two receivers are subtle. So these are relatively familiar songs to me. And so the differences that I'm hearing relative to other times that I've played them have to do with the speakers in the room more than, I think way more than either of these receivers. I listened to some of these songs relatively recently with the Pioneer when I compared it with the modern Yamaha. Those are sounding different now because I'm playing them on different speakers. So that's really the predominant difference relative to other times that I've heard these songs. And the difference between these two receivers was not really noticeable to me. Without them seriously back to back, I'm really just noticing the room and the speakers. Not in that order, mainly speakers and room. Okay, that said, there was a buzz with the turntable in the Pioneer that wasn't present with the Marantz. Is that the fault of the Pioneer or the fault of the turntable? I don't know. But it wasn't noticeable with the Marantz. It went away completely with the CD player, so it's definitely a turntable thing, a phono thing. I'm kind of biased towards the Pioneer. I put a lot of work into the Pioneer, so I have way more sweat equity invested in it. All right, that said, I like the sound of both. I have something of an impression of the Pioneer being a little more neutral than the Marantz. Even though I left the volume knob at the same setting for each of them for all the songs that I played, given the different levels of the different recordings and the CD player versus the records and so on, I did get to experience a range of volumes in each. And each handled it pretty well. With, say, the Metallica on both of them, kind of wanted to turn on the loudness switch. And with both of them, in the CDs, the Coltrane and the Parliament, the highs got a bit shrill. A little, ooh, that's a little loud. I want to turn that down a bit. So if I like the Pioneer so much, why did I give it to my son and why isn't it in my main system here in my living room? Why is the Marantz here? At the time that I got the Pioneer and finished its restoration, I believe the amplifier that I had here was the Dynaco SCA-80, and I put a lot of work into the SCA-80, so at least for that time I was somewhat committed to having it here. Well, also I think when I restored the Pioneer, I had a bit of a mind to selling it. Once I was done with the restoration, I became somewhat reticent to selling it because I wasn't real sure that I was going to be able to get the kind of money that I had been thinking I would get out of it. Rather than sort of settle for a lower price, as my son's 18th birthday came around, was it 18th or 19th? I think it actually was his 19th birthday. Anyway, whatever it was. As his birthday came around and I had this beautiful Pioneer receiver, completely done, ready, and so on, thought, this would be a really great present for my son. So I gave it to him. Now, of course, that Dynaco, by the way, that I didn't swap out for the Pioneer at the time, it's not in my main system now. In fact, we're 2 down the road from that one. The Dynaco I took out because one of the main filter capacitors failed. I took it out, and at that time I had finished doing some pretty much just cosmetic work on the Pioneer SX-780. And so I put that in here and enjoyed it quite a bit while having it in my main system here. I did a video comparing the Marantz 2252 with the Pioneer SX-780. And in that time, I took out the 780 and I put in the 2252. But after that video, I took the Marantz back out and I put the Pioneer SX-780 back in because the Marantz needed some work. And I did do a couple of videos on that work. But then once I was done, I took the Pioneer back out, put the Marantz in. Did I like it much more than the Pioneer? I made that change based on a couple of factors. One, the Marantz is a Marantz, the kind of deal I got on it. I'm just really psyched to be able to have a Marantz. It does have a really nice aesthetic to it. Although I really did like the SX-780 as well. I miss those power meters, And I had made the SX-780 look really nice. I had replaced the vinyl veneer with cherry. But you couldn't see much of that cherry veneer in this position. So really what matters for this placement is that faceplate. And the Marantz kind of wins there. Had it been, say, between the 2252, the Marantz 2252, and this Pioneer SX-828, that would have been a tougher call. And here's why. The SX-828, relative to the 780, is compatible with a wider range of speakers. I have a pair of speakers, my ADS L730s, that are 6 ohm nominal, that the SX-780 was really not able to drive well. It wasn't particularly a subtle thing that those ADS speakers did not sound good compared to the other speakers I had switching among them at the time, namely the AR48Ss and the Hartley Zodiac 1Bs. That Pioneer SX-780 did not make those ADS L730s sound good. The SX-828, on the other hand, is quite capable of driving 4 ohm speakers, and it, as you would have if you watched a previous video of mine in which I compared the SX-828 with that newer Yamaha, those speakers sound really good with the SX-828.
Chuck is in love. Chuck is in love.
So I find no fault with the SX-828. Why the Marantz 2252 versus the SX-780? Finally, I think it was down to the long-term reliability of the Marantz versus the SX-780. The SX-780 has those STK 0050 modules. I don't know if they're particularly prone to failure any more than output transistors of any other unit, but they're kind of problematic to replace. And Fix-It has a great video on doing just that relatively recently with a realistic receiver that has those same output modules. So I think in the long term, I did not want to be the last one holding on to the SX-780 when one of those modules failed. So enjoyed it while I had it. Enjoyed it quite a lot, really. But when I got the Marantz, it's like, yeah, I think I'm going to go with the Marantz. And the SX isn't really an option for me to put into my system now unless I offered a trade to my son for it. It's his now. Yeah, I wish I could give a better impression of any kind of difference that I noticed between these two receivers, but I really just didn't notice anything in particular that was different between them. You know, they're both just really quality builds. You know, maybe the Marantz is a little bit more robust. There are some things that are known to go wrong with the SX-828, things that I've actually fixed, such as the dimmer switch is known to cause problems, and I fixed that. There's a spot on the power supply board that's known to cause problems, and I fixed that. The SX-828 has the power switch integral with the speaker selector. And that can be a problem. That's not necessarily awesome. It'd be better to have a toggle switch. I think I've also seen on Audio Karma where people have said that the Marantz power switch is somewhat prone to failure. It's a push button switch rather than a toggle, and I think push buttons are just generally not as reliable as toggles. That said, it seems pretty robust. It's not your sort of cheapo plastic push button switch. The stock speaker connections on the Marantz are big winners over the stock speaker connections on the Pioneer. Stock speaker connections on that SX-828 and of that generation preceding and after that, the X2X, you know, before that the 440 and the 990 and 770 and so on also had those awful plug speaker connectors, and the 838, 938 and so on. That generation also had those awful speaker connectors. As I said, with this one I've put on 5-way binding posts. It's got the usual sort of heinous old style Pioneer wonky plug type speaker jacks. I've replaced one set of those with 5-way binding posts. I guess my final advice on these two receivers, if you find a nice example of either one of these, snatch it. Man, these are really nice receivers. They have really nice blue dial faces, both of them. The Marantz is maybe a little better looking than the Pioneer, but it's a close call. I mean, the Pioneer comes stock with that wooden case, which is pretty nice. The Marantz, you can get a wooden case for it, but it doesn't come default with it. If you have my version of the Marantz without the wooden case and this version of the SX-828 that comes stock with a wooden case, and these receivers weren't to be tucked into a slot like my Marantz is and were instead sitting up out in the open, the Pioneer's a winner there. The wooden case is quite beautiful. The metal case on the Marantz, not so much. With the Marantz, I'd say you would really want to get that wooden case if you were planning on having that top of that case and the sides and so on particularly visible where you have it in your system. For me, it's not that big a deal now. I'm not so inclined to invest in a wooden case with the Marantz because I wouldn't be able to see it where it is now. If that changes, then my tendency to want to invest in that wooden case would change.